You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. I want to grab just a couple of minutes before we start today's podcast and let you know about a new membership community that's opening up. It's called the Sandbox. Now, the Sandbox was explicitly designed so that folks like you who have big dreams and goals, who are working on busting through limiting labels and beliefs, who are overcoming challenges, have a place to come, to be encouraged, to get tips and tools, to meet other people and share ideas, and just relax. So as a member, you're going to have exclusive access to an extensive library of training, tools, and resources that have been meticulously crafted over the years. But that's not all. You are actually in the driver's seat, so you can help shape the direction of the content and the Sandbox. So what's actually in the Sandbox? Well, there will be expert sessions that will be tailored to your needs with a focus on the questions that come from our community. There are group learning sessions, live trainings, Q&A sessions, and we will be sharing inspiring membership success stories. You will have an opportunity to learn and grow alongside fellow Sandbox community members. If you need guidance or support, our online forum is going to be the perfect space to engage with other members, ask questions, find motivation, and share your success with the Sandbox community. We are committed to your success, and that's why we're offering monthly challenges and support check-ins, ensuring you're always on track. So click the link below and put your name either on the waiting list or sign up today for the Sandbox community, and we'll see you there where the dreams will be unleashed and you will start making rapid progress. Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. Welcome back. I'm Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, where we're on a mission to help individuals, teams, and organizations, especially nonprofits, think outside the box, move beyond limiting labels and beliefs, and create a profound impact that they're on a mission to do. We do this by sharing accomplished and inspiring guests who have challenged their own limiting labels and beliefs to pursue and accomplish personal and professional goals. So that's one of the reasons that I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Thomas Vincent Jackobs. Now, I'll ask, I'm going to call you Tom. Is that okay? Or do you go by the full name?
No, please. It sounded a little bit like my mother calling me Thomas Vincent.
It's like,
so sorry.
Thomas Vincent Jacobs, get in here right now.
That's a little PTSD.
I think we all have those memories, like when you get your first, middle, and last name, it's like, whoa.
Ooh. Oh, yeah. So whooping's about to come.
Yeah, or at least something it's not the name you want to necessarily be called by in that tone. Okay,
that's
so
right.
Anyway, folks,
Tom's good.
Tom is what it's going to be from here on out. So Tom is a seasoned entrepreneur, and he's experienced highs and lows in his own journey, which we're going to talk about today. He's got over 30 years as an entrepreneur, and that journey, to his own description, has been a roller coaster of both failures and successes. But those have actually shaped him to who he is today, and he said he would not trade any of it for anything, because that experience has been the building blocks of his growth and resilience. So isn't that great when we can grow and become more resilient? Now, 6 years ago, if my math is correct, 2017, Tom made a significant move. It's a big move. And he sold his fitness business that he'd been operating for 9 years, and he went on an entirely new adventure as the impact pilot. I love this concept. So his mission now is helping fellow entrepreneurs soar to new heights by generating more income through ingenious sales, conversations, strategies, and the power of storytelling. So listeners all know we love storytelling here. We love ingenious ideas and thoughts. So Tom's not limited to the entrepreneurial world. He's made appearances on various media platforms. And he has a BFA degree in theater from DePaul University, licenses on land, sea. So sometimes I transcribe things in my head. He has licenses for land, sea, and air, including private pilot's license for single engine airplanes and a scuba certification. So his skills are as diverse as they come. So today we're going to dive deep, my intentional scuba reference, into Tom's journey, his passion for helping others succeed, and how those diverse combination of experiences have shaped his approach to business and his life. And we're going to talk about how to craft an impactful story so that you can grow the business that you love and influence others, and how to overcome real and perceived limitations. So with that, let's formally welcome, and I won't use your whole name, Tom Jackobs, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was quite the intro. Thank you.
It's fun. It's just so fun to learn about people. And I think, I should make the intro short. I said, no, but I really think this is important, to me. So I want to start back, not that far back, but a little bit back, of where you talked about your whole major pivot or shift in 2017. What prompted that change for you to sell your business and go in this direction as the impact pilot?
Yeah, it's a great question. And really that started about 5 years into me owning the business. So at that time, I had been working with a coaching company that was helping me with my fitness business and everything that you need as a business owner. And I was doing really well in the business, and they asked me to actually help them coach other fitness business owners. And so I did that, while I still owned my fitness center, and I absolutely loved it. And, I was able to travel around the world and do speaking events, and I was able to sell their program for them and do coaching. And that started me on this road of, there's a world beyond the brick and mortar and the physical location. And I love traveling, and having that brick and mortar was really kind of keeping me in place, keeping me in Houston, or always coming back there. So I eventually made the decision to sell it. And it was probably one of the best decisions I've made in my life.
So did you know prior to them asking you to help other businesses get going that you had a knack and a love for coaching and helping people in that way? Had you done that prior?
I had not done business coaching prior to that, but, coaching in the physical aspect, I think is very similar to coaching, business. It's just you coach from your experience and ask the right questions. and that's really what sales is too. When it really comes down to it, you're coaching somebody on their way to purchasing your product. So it's all tied together. So it wasn't like it was a complete 180. It's not like I went to medical school and became a doctor or something like that.
Well, you did get all your licenses for other things.
That's true. So when the apocalypse happens, I'm all good. I'll either be under the sea, over the ocean, or wherever.
Whatever. We can count on you to be out there leading someone. Okay. So, but you said that throughout all of this, the changes, the transitions, and what you're doing brick and mortar to what you're doing today, that you have really honed the craft and the art of impactful storytelling. So define impactful storytelling for me, because it's now, and people are saying, we want your story out, storytelling. And when I ask that question, people have similar views on it, but different takes on it. So share your definition of impactful storytelling.
Yeah, well, the impact story that we ultimately uncover by working together is the signature story that you might tell at every event, every intro of any speaking engagement. But it's that defining story in your life. And we have multiple defining stories in our lives. But generally we have one or two that had that do or die moment. It was either a comedy or a tragedy. And it's meant to get your prospects or your who you're speaking to understand why you do what you do today. And I think it's important to share that, especially in a sales conversation, and especially if you're in a what I consider a heart-centered industry, like health and wellness is very much heart-centered.
Absolutely.
That people want to know you and why you do what you do, so that they can trust you with their money and their body sometimes, and help them change the situation that they're currently in.
Yeah, that's a vulnerable, and I don't mean like terribly vulnerable, but you're basically saying, I need guidance. I want help. And it is good. You want confidence in the person, but also you want someone that is relatable. In my opinion,
100%.
Having had coaches in the fitness space, no, I want someone that's relatable who can say, I think you could do a little more. I know. I know I could. It's like, are you tired? I just wish I were. No, I can keep going. But at any rate, but then give me an example. Like if someone were to say to you, which I'm asking you now, actually, what was your moment, your defining moment when people asked you, what was that click?
Yeah. So mine was actually in 2000, in exactly 2001 timeframe, when I'd moved down to Houston for a job in the oil and gas industry, which I'd been working for 8 years at that point, a total of 12 years in oil and gas. And over that time, I'd gotten really fat and unhealthy. I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am today. And that's not a good look on a 5'8" person. So, and I went to the doctor and he said 3 things. You're 40 pounds overweight. You have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And you'll be lucky to see 40 if you continue down this route. And that really shocked me into just going, wow, at 30 years old and I'm already on heart medication. I mean, that's something that my dad, has to take on a regular basis. And I didn't want to go down that route. And so I asked the doctor, I was like, well, do I have to take the medication or is there something else that I can do to not take the medication? Because he kind of chuckled, said, well, there's this thing called diet and exercise that some people do, but I really recommend that you take the medication.
Oh, really? He wasn't being ironic?
Oh, no. It was like
I could see someone
serious.
being sarcastic. Well, you could do diet and exercise, or I could put you on drugs.
Yeah. No, I didn't think I was that far gone. And so I went on this journey, a 12-week journey for getting my body back and getting my health back. And it worked. And I did a contest. It was a 12-week body for life. I remember to this day, 12. Yeah. It was a 12-week body transformation contest. I did the whole, before and after picture, wrote a sad sob story about how it changed my life, which it did, and entered the contest. I ultimately didn't win the contest, but I did lose 40 pounds of fat and gain 10 pounds of muscle in 12 weeks and completely changed just who I was in the trajectory of my life, because that got me the love of fitness too. And that's what got me into personal training and helping other people that had the same struggles that I did, reverse those struggles and get off the medication.
That's so powerful.
Thanks. And so that's my kind of signature story that I would always use when I was doing speaking engagements or when I was doing sales presentations for anybody interested in joining my fitness business.
Yeah, well, it's so relatable, right? We have those inflection points, those choice points. And, to get that told to you at 30 is like, hello, what?
Yeah.
You got to be joking. And then it's like, he's not laughing. It's not a joke. But how great that you stepped up and said, I think I'm going to try something different. And became your own coach on that. So then you have had in business as well, I imagine. You think about that example, and that translates over oftentimes into leadership or entrepreneurial challenges as well, right? It's like here you are on the precipice, pick one way or the other. You got to do something, right?
Yep.
So how does that, or how does being a leader in business come with those limitations, and how have you overcome those challenges?
I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're just kind of thrown into becoming a leader, and you just have to kind of figure it out over time. Luckily, I had coaches along the way that helped guide me based on their experience doing the same thing. And I think that was the key. Is I always chose coaches that had similar experiences that I didn't want to go through already, and that's the way that I coach as well. Is, I started this business. I almost failed at the business. I succeeded. I sold it. And there's so many different areas in just that fitness business that, I can teach other people so that they don't have to go through the same struggles that I went through, or at least limit the struggles a little bit. I think everybody needs to have a little bit of that strife in their life to grow, but it doesn't have to be, do or die at that point.
So give me some examples of strife that helps us grow. That is not do or die. I like the concept. I just want a little more picture in my head about where you're taking us.
Oh yeah. I mean, it could be anything. For me, it always seemed to be financial problems in the business. Just, areas where things just weren't working, right? I wasn't able to get the new clients coming in, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Do I Google, how to market for a fitness business? How do I sell fitness? And actually, that's what I did when I was, 6 months into owning the business, and my bank account was draining, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to make payroll and rent the next time. Is what do I do? And that's when I actually reached out for help. And in doing that, as an entrepreneur, and I think a lot of times we're brainwashed into thinking that, you're an entrepreneur, you can do anything. You don't need anybody's help. Just grind it out and it'll happen. And I think that advice is so toxic that it doesn't do anybody any good. And really it should be, you're an entrepreneur. Find some other entrepreneurs to hang around with and figure it out that you're not alone, that there is a community of people that are going through the exact same thing you are. Find that community and learn from them so that you can progress along your journey.
Well, and I always think about it like, our parents. So since I called you by all your names, I'll keep the parent kind of thing going. But I remember my dad saying, the only reason I'm telling you this is so it doesn't have to be so difficult for you. Then, a teenager, I'm thinking, well, I still don't think you know what you're talking about, right? Until about 8 years later, I'm going, man, that was really good advice. But it's that whole thing. Like if someone doesn't have to be that much further ahead of you, they just need to have gone through that gauntlet and can say, listen, you might want to think about this as an option, or I tried this and it worked, or I learned this. I think people are very willing to help in that way. If we will ask and say, hey, can I have a little bit of time here? And I think you're right. I think it is very toxic to be told that you can do it all, you can grind it out, or worse, that you have to do everything because you can't afford to pay someone to help you, right? Because it's so, the sense of relief and freedom and the ability to do what you're in business to do expands when you get that kind of support and help.
Yeah.
Do you agree, or is this just me?
No, that is 100% on, especially about hiring. And I remember having this argument with the coach that I had at the time, and actually she still is my coach to this day. That I was like, I just can't hire an assistant. That just seems not me. Why do I need to pay somebody $10 an hour to blah 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 blah? And it was just all these, limiting beliefs in my head about, being able to afford somebody. And, finally I bit the bullet. I hired this guy for 20 hours a week, $10 an hour, $200 a week, right? Not a lot of money, but at that time it was a lot of money for me. I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to get a return on investment on this? I swear in the second week of this guy joining the company, it was just my assistant, right? Just did all the administrative things. I sold more personal training packages the next week than I had had in months before, just because I had the energy to actually do the sales consultations, do them well, and do some marketing outside of, being inside the facility, vacuuming, cleaning the toilets, doing everything, making folders up for new clients, all the administrative stuff that I shouldn't be doing I was paying somebody else $10. I was making more than, like $80 an hour not doing that. So, the math, and that's what my coach helped me figure out, is like, we did the math together, and I was like, okay, yeah, this doesn't make sense for me to do that work.
Right. Well, and sometimes like doing that work, which, folders and all that stuff, what's great about it is you can avoid what you need to be doing. It's like, I feel so productive because I can look at the end of the day and see this got accomplished. But you're thinking, yeah, but that was the wrong thing for me to be spending my time on. Someone else could do it probably better and faster, and I could be doing the high impact work. So
that's good.
That's a good takeaway. The whole piece of I can't afford it. I had similar conversations before I got help, and now I can't imagine not having help. I'm like going, even though I have the time, I'm thinking, why would I do that? There's something else I'm supposed to be doing, right? Or I want to be doing to grow the business, to help more people. And it isn't doing this admin thing. But I will say, admin is a good distraction for me when I'm trying to put something off.
Such a good, any time that I start to do like admin work or I start cleaning, that's a trigger for me now to say, what am I avoiding doing in the business?
I have a lot of clean dishes all the time. I'm thinking,
I know, it's like,
I just need 5 minutes. Why are you cleaning the dishes at this time? I just need 5 minutes to think. So,
you're right.
Anyhow, okay, but let's talk though about storytelling. Because you really have honed that craft and the art of it. So share some key strategies and insights on how entrepreneurs can harness the power of storytelling to elevate their business and why they should do it,
Yeah. It's really important to connect with other humans at a human level, especially on sales and especially for kind of those more personalized services. Health and wellness is a prime example of that. And it can be a struggle for a lot of entrepreneurs to know that, gosh, I don't want to share my story with the world. It's kind of embarrassing, or they say, well, nobody's going to care about my story. Like, why should I have to, share that? And it's coming from a place of, probably fear of being a little vulnerable and, letting people inside, which I totally get, because that was really hard for me to share a lot of these stories. But ultimately, when I did, the result was great. It was amazing. And it's really a simple framework of finding that right story. And I take people through this. And actually, the workbook that I'd love to give your audience has the whole process built into it as well. But the very first thing is take inventory of all the stories in your life that had an impact on you. And I always caution people on only focusing on the tragedies, because that's, everybody hears the rags to riches story, the near-death experience, all that, which are valid stories and great to share, but not everybody has those stories. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have one of those, really good stories. And that's like, every story is a good story when you craft it the right way. So we never forget about the comedies in there as well. And so we go through that, make the list, and then I have them go through the list and relive those moments. And we do this on Zoom, and I'm watching them as they go through this, and you can see, like, when they start to get a little uncomfortable, they kind of shift in their chair, or maybe they start crying a little bit, or laughing or something like that. And when they're in that moment of, going through the stories in their own head, and I see some type of physical reaction, I know that's one of the stories that we need to dive into. And I was asked to, I was like, well, are any of those stories, did you feel like your palms starting to sweat, your breathing changed, your heart was starting to race. And like, oh yeah, this story right here is really embarrassing. It's like, great, that's the one we're doing. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. But ultimately going through that process of developing the story, then it's very cathartic sometimes, because a lot of, like, for me, I never really processed a lot of those stories that I went through. And in writing them out and going through this process, I was like, that makes sense now. And now I can connect the dots and say, okay, I had to go through that so that I could learn this. And that's ultimately what you're teaching your audience too.
You're teaching them that the journey is necessary and important is that. Yeah. That's great. The squirm factor.
Oh.
My coach did that to me recently. He says, okay, now that we were just doing a whole bunch. He says, so that little thing you just said, he goes, that needs to be recorded. I go, it's not that big a deal. He goes, I know, it makes you uncomfortable to do it. I said, I have another week before it has to be done. It'll get done. I gave my commitment, I would do it. But you're absolutely right. It's the squirm factor. It's like, can we just move on? Why do I have to share? Why do I got to share? But it is important. Now, let's talk about one or two folks that you've worked with and how the quote unquote squirm factor has helped them.
Yeah. One of my very first clients that I worked with, and this years ago, and her name is Fatima, and she's a silver medalist actually in I think it was the 400 relay or 1600 relay of the Atlanta Olympic Games. So back in the day, that was the Atlanta Games, was where the bomb exploded in the village.
Yeah. It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. And so she was at those games, obviously wasn't injured, but went on to win a silver medal. And so she came to me, and she owned a fitness business in California and was struggling getting new clients. And she wanted to do more speaking. And so she came to me primarily as a speaking coach, but we ultimately worked on her signature story and then wove that into a presentation that she performed and then got the profits off of as well. And her story was, talk about a tragedy. It was such a good story and impactful in her life and how it related to her training system. Because as a child in Africa growing up, so she's from Africa, she's growing up there as a child, as a female child in Africa. At 11 years old, she was basically sold into slavery to a 55-year-old man at 12 years old. And she was like, obviously I don't want to do this. And so she ran away from home. And in that process of running away from home, she became that runner. That became her label then. And she ran away, found some missionaries that helped her and got her an education, got her away from that, awful environment, and got her education, got her training. She ultimately, at one point, I think said she was in her 20s, and she took her first plane ride, went to Canada, saw white people for one of the first times, and it's like playing with our hair and just kind of like this is really interesting, kind of like how anybody is when they see somebody that's completely different from what we've been used to seeing. And so she goes through this story about the suicide attempts that she had as a girl and the escape and all of this, and it was just, we wove this story together that was, just so heavy at moments. And then we lifted the audience back up and got some laughs. And it was just beautiful when I finally saw it on video. And she said the very first presentation that she did, she was like totally scared to do it. It was to her church group as well. So I was like, well, this is good because at least it's a supportive group that you're around. And she got a standing ovation after that very first presentation because it was such a powerful story. But ultimately, after a year of doing more speaking engagements, her business doubled. And the only marketing that she was doing was public speaking and telling her story at different events. and different groups. And she was like, Tom, this is amazing. I never thought that my childhood story would inspire people to get healthy and fit. I was like, that's the power of story.
Such a great example, Tom. So great. Yeah. And your description of it secondhand is chilling in and of itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
you can just imagine her doing it firsthand.
Oh God. Yeah. But proud of her.
Yeah. Oh, she's so good. Yeah.
Yep, good on her. But so now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to be in the head of folks I work with. They're nonprofits. They're saying, but I don't have that big of a story, right? That's a dramatic story. And I'm representing this group. So why does my personal story matter? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody has a really good story to tell. Even my story of losing weight, tons of people have done that. I could have just skip that whole story, but finding the relevance to what I do today is actually pretty easy to do with any story. And that's where a lot of people struggle. That's usually the objection that I get is, well, like my story has nothing to do with what I do today. Like there's no relation. I said, let's not worry about that right now. Let's just kind of dive into the story and figure out what that connection is, what that bridge is to what you do today. Because ultimately people, like I said before, people want to do business with other people and to be able to relate with them. And whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, it doesn't matter. Like, especially with donors, I think it's even more important for nonprofits to identify the story of why they're doing what they're doing.
As an organization or as the people within the organization? Because I'm thinking of it all these different levels.
Absolutely. So there needs to be an organizational story, but also the people involved in the organization need to have their own story about why they joined that organization or why they lead it or why they do what they're doing for it. And those stories are really, really powerful when they're done correctly, to persuade others to do things with you. So whether you're getting donors or you're selling your product, it's the same thing. They need to understand why you're doing it versus just the numbers and the facts and figures about the impact that the organization has. Because they're not doing business necessarily with the organization. They're doing business with you.
Absolutely. So, that brings up so many questions I could ask you. But let me go back narrow again. So I'm actually picturing a couple of people I've worked with recently. So they have their story and they feel they should shift the story onto the success stories of the people they've helped, right? But I'm thinking their motivation story and why they show up honestly, the work is not easy work. It's fatiguing. It's hard, under-resourced frequently, and the need for donors and financial, in my opinion, untethered dollars, right? That can be used to help people in a way that isn't totally prescriptive, is important. But if you can't tell your story about that, so I guess my question is, there's a gap between the inspiration story and knowing who we are as an organization or who I am as one of the people in the organization to that piece that says, but without you, the person who I'm speaking to or alongside, we're nothing, right? How can you build a story arc like that, or a story that brings people in and says, I got to be with them, whether it's I'm a financial donor, a grantor, volunteer, whatever. Have you seen success in those areas?
Yeah. I mean, when you're telling your personal story, you are the hero of your story. And I always use the hero's framework as the way of writing a story because it's worked for ages. And so we go on this hero's journey. And when you're telling your own personal story, you are the hero in that story. And ultimately, though, in the way that we tell that story, we're getting the audience, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, we're getting them to come into our story and be the hero alongside us. So at points in your story, people should be going, yeah, I can see myself there. I can see myself in that same situation. It'll be interesting to see how she gets out of it. Right. Or it's like, oh yeah, like I went down that route, but she went down that route. Oh, that's interesting. Like, what's going to happen? And so we just take them on this journey of seeing themselves in that as that hero. And ultimately, we're going to shift that around to now they're the hero of their own journey once they join us, and we're the guide that's helping them along. We're the Yoda to their Luke.
Love Yoda. Okay, so we're talking, sales, and you're working with entrepreneurs, and I'm working with entrepreneurs and nonprofits. Sales is often one of those things like, I don't want to do it. Can someone else do it? Can you just do it for me? And I really think that, really, it's like,
no, it's true.
Think about being a kid. Can I pay you to do my chores? But that ownership of it, the further I've gone into business and stuff, and someone says, do you like selling? I said, I don't think of it as selling. I actually think of it as trying to help someone get what they want. And if I can't talk to you or help you, how do I know what you need or want? But that's coming from a many years, right? So, but you have someone who might be going, oh, I'm just starting this business. So what are some of the misconceptions people have when you're working with them about sales, how to go about them, and just sales in general?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people believe sales is a verb, like, because it's something that you do to somebody, and it's not. And I would challenge everybody to shift their mindset over to problem solving mode. And everybody loves to solve a problem, right? And that's what salespeople do. There's a problem. We're here to solve it. And we'll either solve it with our program or refer you to somebody who can. And that's, when you think about it, I mean, that becomes very empowering at that point, and saying, oh yeah, I want to help people. That's what heart-centered selling to me is all about, is being able to help people realize that the problem that they have right now is solvable and is best to be solved with my program if I really believe that I can help that person.
Yeah.
And that's the shift that everybody that has this fear of selling. And I was one of them, because, I was always grown up, as I was growing up, Thomas Vincent, don't talk to that salesperson. They'll make you do something. It was almost like that. I remember one time I was a little bit of a mischievous child growing up.
No kidding. I could have never guessed.
That's right. So I was like flipping through the paper, and I saw this ad for free steak knives. And I think we had just had meat the night before. And I was like, guys, these knives that we have are awful. Like, we could use some new steak knives. And so I called up the place, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. You can get these free steak knives. All you have to do is listen to a presentation from our vacuum guy. So
steak knives, vacuums. I'm not getting it, but I want my knives.
I know. I wanted the knives. And so that was the incentive to have a sales presentation. So that's pretty clever. And so I made the appointment. I said, oh, hey, Mom, Dad, I have a friend coming over. Hey, can we just just sit here and I tell you what, when that guy showed up and started vacuuming the couch, and then half the couch, actually, my dad was just like steaming. He was being very polite, but I could just tell that something was going to happen.
Thomas Vincent, what were you thinking?
Vincent. That's right. I was like, yeah, but we got free steak knives. You didn't have to buy the vacuum. You still got knives. And they're like,
that's so great.
This child. Yeah, but it was that mentality of they're here to do something to us, not to help us solve a problem.
But so that I was stuck. Did you learn something about a vacuum?
Oh, I did. Yeah. I think it was actually a Hoover vacuum back in that time. Yeah. And it actually did a really good job.
Nothing's wasted. I don't want your vacuum today, but I know something about vacuums now. Right. I like that whole curious mind, though, and very creative about getting those steak knives. All right, I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit. And that is, I asked pre-call, if you will, that what are you reading or learning from currently? And you talked about reading We're All in This Together. Have you finished that book yet, or are you still reading it?
I'm still reading it.
By Michael
Or listening to it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know what? That's a great audio book.
Yeah.
But what drew? So this book is written by Mike Robbins, who was a former baseball player, which drew me to him. I'm thinking, well, I'm so curious what we're all in together about. Tell me what drew you to this book, and then up to this point, what are some of your takeaways from it?
So it was actually my coach that suggested that, hey, I read that book. And then also, and the plan is after I read it, that I'll take my team through the book as well. And as a way of uniting a team, because the team that I have is remote. So nobody's ever met before except over Zoom. So there's no physical meeting and living in all different places of the world. And it's hard to get a really good team dynamic if you've never met each other and you don't really know everything about that person. Not that you have to know everything about your coworkers, but it makes a more fun, engaging employment when you know who you're working with and why they're doing the work with you. And so that's the reason why I got the book and started listening to it. And just some of the training that he's gone through, especially about diversity inclusion, is really interesting. I mean, this one story that he told just really struck out to me about he was in a training and the trainer asked all the men when was the last time that they felt a little unsafe. And so the men, they thought about it a couple times maybe in their lives that they felt unsafe. I think he took them back to did you feel unsafe more than a year ago? Yeah. 6 months, 3 months, 2 months today, right? Came all the way down to today. And not many guys were in the last week. And he did that with the women, then same group, just about everybody had their hand raised all the way through to today. And he was shocked. He was like, and I was shocked hearing that story. I was like, wow, that is quite a difference. And it doesn't need to be that way, especially if it's around work, because then that impedes how we show up as employees and do the work. Because if we're troubled with something or we got accosted on the train in the morning or, something happened in the car, on the way to work, you're not going to be that productive. And if you don't have a trusting team that you can talk to and openly talk about situations like that, then that's going to further keep you from being your true authentic self at work.
It's very isolating, when you can't be that. And I've come, this may be over the top, but I actually have come to realize our team is all remote. We are not, they're not my employees. We're all independent people who feel like we are hooked together on this journey. We show up, we keep working together, but there is a sense of family. It's like someone goes through something, we're there, so mm-hmm. I don't mind butting in, with boundaries. Yeah. I ask permission, but it's like, I do want to know how people are doing, what's going on, and because life can be tough. And if you just show up to do your quote unquote job, you never know what someone may be dealing with. And I remember that part of his book. And when people are like, I've never felt that way, I'm thinking, are you kidding me? There's no woman on the planet that I've ever met that would say they never felt unsafe, Yeah. And if you don't know it, it's just because it's deeper in your psyche, but we're always thinking okay, where's my keys? Where's this? It's just a weird subtext, let's say. So you're right. Yeah. You don't need any more of that in your life. You certainly don't need it in your work environment.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. I was so glad to see you were reading that.
Yeah.
You're going to take your team through it.
Yes.
Very cool. And I imagine you'll be implementing that in some of your coaching as well.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, how can we not be shaped by what we learn? and the people who mentor us. You have referenced many times throughout the conversation of working with people, getting support and coaching, either for yourself or in your role with others. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, how do I know what a good mentor or coach for me is, or what type of person I should be even reaching out to? What should I ask for help with? Like, is it for an assistant or something different? How do you help people think through that, Tom, and figure it out?
Well, I'm at the end of the day, I'm a numbers guy. So I always use the numbers of the business to guide decisions. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's worked for me. And so especially when you're looking to hire somebody, it's looking at, well, one, can you afford to hire that person? But then also asking the question, can you afford not to hire that person? And looking at both sides of that equation. And when I was hiring the assistant, could I afford $200 an hour, or an hour, $200 for the week? Yeah, I could squeeze it out, but could I not afford like 20 hours of my life back? Like, how could you put a price on that? And so that's when I made the decision to hire the guy. And every time that I've hired a coach or gone to a seminar or some type of, improvement work, I always look at, what's my potential ROI if I implement everything that I learn here. And that's the key, is that you have to implement.
Yep.
There's so many lifelong learners out there that just love to learn stuff, but never really do anything. And so that's really how I make that decision is, am I lacking in this area? Who's the best person or second person or third best person that I can talk to that can help me overcome some of the fear that I have about jumping into doing this?
Yep. Yeah. And it's just that mental questioning of yourself, asking yourself good questions like you just laid out for us is helpful. And then rather than just staying stuck in the thinking about it, at least taking the step, make a call, schedule so many people will give you a little bit of time just to help you think through something. And yes, it can be nervous. Don't fall into the fear that it's a steak knife vacuum thing. Like if you get on a call, they're going to sell you something. They might try to. They might tell you that you're not a fit for them, but they were happy to meet you and they can help you for 20, 30, 40 minutes. So, but I would encourage people to step out, do something, right? If you're serious about wanting to grow, risk a little and reach out. So on that, I want to ask you another question, which is about, we're really asking our guests to reflect back on previous guests on the podcast. Was there a takeaway they had from them? And part of that is because our guests like you are giving of your time and your talent here. And I want, to the degree we are able to on the podcast, to continue to lift that up. So as you go out there, you'll become one of the people listen to more and more. So can you share with me an episode, a guest, something you took away from them that was helpful for you?
Yeah, it was the episode with Dr. Mercer. And
Marianne Mercer.
Talking about Marianne. Yeah, that was great episode. And I love just how she wove her own personal story. And I thought it was a very clever storytelling technique that she used about the labels that she was prescribed as a child, and ultimately how she overcame the learning disabilities that she was labeled with and became a doctor. Which is such a great story to tell, and the way that she told it was very, very engaging. So I was struck by two things. One is just the story itself and her resilience, but also her storytelling techniques.
Yeah, I know. I felt it like I didn't get where it was going until almost the turn, right? And I'm thinking, you got me.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that. I love being that. Like when I'm surprised by a guest where I'm going, that was so great.
That's good storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Well, what I'm doing with this is I'm going to clip them and start to use them so people can go, when I listen to Dr. Mary, I can look for this. I thought the same thing. I thought, you see who the quote unquote end project is in person is, at least currently. Everybody's evolving. but you never think about, like, people can look at you and say, oh yeah, he's got all this stuff behind him. But without your story, they don't know what did it take to shape and mold you. And that's the beauty of your story and how you are here promoting story. So I want to ask you if there are any final words of wisdom, something you want to share with you mentioned your guidebook you'd like folks to have. Can you talk a little bit about that, Tom?
Yeah, so it's called the Storybook. So it's how to create your own personal story. So I take you through a step-by-step process on how to identify the different stories in your life, ultimately pick the 2 or 3 that have the most emotional charge to them, and then how to craft those into the hero's journey. So it's just takes you step by step through that. And that's available on my website, which is Tom Jackobs, TomJacobs.com/storybook. And so it's just a quick, probably takes somebody maybe 30 minutes to an hour to go through. But ultimately, if you really want to dive in and get a really good story, take a little bit more time on the front end, identifying those stories.
Yeah, I think that's a super great gift, because once we can start pulling the stories, it's self-affirming. You're going, wow, I kind of have a lot of experience or things I could share or benefit others with. So that Absolutely. In itself is a gift to help for us to reflect. I'm happy to share those resources in the podcast notes. So folks, we'll have links to that for Tom. And what's the best way for folks to connect with you, Tom? Is it through your website, or is there a better way?
Yeah, through the website's the best way, or there's email and social media. I'm Impact Pilot on Instagram, and then Tom Jacobs on everything else.
So many different handles.
I get confused.
Hey,
luckily, I have a team that handles all that for me, so I don't have to deal with it.
I know. Thank goodness for teams.
Yeah.
So, folks, I'm sitting here in Pacific Daylight Time on the west coast of the United States. Tom's in. Where are you now? I'm sorry, you told me at the beginning. I forgot.
I'm in Taiwan. So we're in China Standard Time so it gets confusing when it's CST, because people think, oh, you're in Central Time.
Central Standard. We're only 2 hours
different. Yeah.
No, so it's early morning.
Taiwan. Yeah, early morning in Taiwan, Taipei, Taiwan.
I've been there once in an airport. It was immense, and it made me pause. Okay, there are a lot of rules, and you do not break the rules. That was my takeaway. Follow the rules, and all will be well. So thanks for getting up early, bringing your coffee, and having a great conversation with us, Tom. And I look forward to more conversations.
Thank you. Me too.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.